So much. So my name is Hadar Freehling. I'm a cloud security architect for VMware. And today we're going to talk about public cloud security. And how many of you actually knew that VMware did anything in public cloud security? Yeah, that's what I figured. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the problem. We're going to talk about some of the solution we have out there, some of the feature sets. So one of the things we are seeing with the, everybody moving more workloads to public cloud is that there are a lot of issues and breaches that are occurring due to misconfiguration. It's not that people are doing this maliciously. It's really just that we have enabled so many new folks to literally click two buttons and have a workload out there on the internet, and they haven't really thought about security. That's not their prime objective. They're developers, they're infrastructure folks. And where we used to have the data center, which was nicely siloed off, and you had your security team and your infrastructure team. In the public cloud, it's a couple clicks, an API call, whatever it is, and you got your workload out there. And so we did actually a study, which we commissioned, and we saw that misconfiguration is still a problem with our customers and the industry in general. This report was literally done last year. This is not like 5 years ago, even though we thought we were kind of getting over this. This is still a common issue. And you can see here, it's not just that people don't know what they're doing out there. It's also they don't have the visibility into the environment, right? I've talked to a lot of customers, and I'm sure you guys are aware of this, right? You have multiple regions, multiple accounts, and as a security person, you're trying to get a hold of understanding of what's going on in there. It's really difficult. It's not like an easy, one place to get all that information. And so, this is part of what we're seeing. The other change, as we've all seen in industry, is the developer to security analyst ratio, right? I don't think it's getting any better. I don't think we're hiring in, more security people, even though we're trying to, right? There are more developers out there. They're spinning up more things, and they're moving faster and faster. We don't have the gateways anymore. We don't have the architectural review boards as much as we used to, right? Everybody's moving to this DevSecOps model. And so that's creating great, velocity in terms of application development, but it's also putting security folks kind of behind the 8 ball. They don't know what's going on. A lot of them, being honest, don't come uncomfortable with the public cloud, right? They come from the data center where things were, blinky lights and a firewall and all that good stuff. And now it's all APIs and software. So there's a lot of disconnect as well. And so VMware, along with providing you financial management from the public cloud with CloudHealth, now has the security portfolio, which is the Secure State product. It's under the same umbrella, different though in terms of the usage and the audience that are going to it. So what is Secure State, right? Secure State is, these are the big use cases that we see for it, right? First of all, it's visibility and searchability. The first thing we do with the tool is we take in all of your data points from your multi-clouds and put it into this database. And this database is not your typical database, it's a graph database. And what we're doing is we're taking all the data and attaching it to each other. So what I mean by that is you have an instance, for example. Well, an instance has an image attached to it. It has a security group. It might have a key pair, has a volume, all that stuff. We map all that out, and then we see how everything is connected to each other. And the reason we do that is that, especially in the public cloud, one change to one parameter has a bigger downstream effect, or can have. And so it's not necessarily a network issue where we had in the data center where it's like, you have east-west traffic. That was the big issue from a security perspective. In the public cloud, we find it's a misconfiguration upstream or downstream can have a adverse effect of different objects. And so we map all that together, show that to you, allow you to search it. We do the same thing for not just your infrastructure, but Kubernetes as well. So if you have managed Kubernetes or Kubernetes running on like an EC2 or Azure, whatever it is, we'll map that, and then we'll map that Kubernetes environment to your infrastructure. So we're able to gap that so you can say, this Kubernetes cluster with this namespace is running on this EC2, which is connected to this security group, which is attached to a VPC, right? I can give you all that visibility, search all that, and give you kind of insight into that. And this is not even from the security side. This is strictly a visibility capabilities. And then we have our rules on top of that, right? So we, I think we have over 1,000 rules at the moment covering Azure, GCP, AWS, and Kubernetes. We align to 20 plus different compliance regulations. You can write your own compliance regulations. So idea, again, to kind of give you security visibility. And then I think somebody was brought up previously, well, that's great, but what do I do with all that data? So we actually have remediation capabilities, and we'll talk about operations, but not only are we able to do remediation, we also allow for alerting and suppression. And we find suppression is actually just as important, if not more important than alerting, because there's a lot of stuff you want to ignore. There's a lot of noise. We actually allow you to pre-create some policies about what I should ignore. So you can say, if something has this tag in this region, ignore any of these rules for it, or any of these types of policies. And then of course we do compliance. And to build on that, right? So these are some of the numbers in terms, it's marketing, so I'll put it in there. But we do manage a lot of different resources already, and we're unique in our speed. So one of the things we do is instead of doing a polling interval, which is how a lot of tools do in terms of pulling in the data, we actually subscribe to an event stream. So we get the logs directly from the cloud providers. We ingest that, and that's when we'll go and do we call a micro inventory. Well, we'll do a describe, but we'll only look at like that little section of your cloud. We won't do a describe all. And so this is really big when you have, API threshold limitations that you're hitting, and you don't want to do every 15-minute polling interval. It also gives you that faster feedback. So if you're trying to integrate this into your pipeline, your developers aren't waiting for that polling interval to then pull. Yes?
Are you looking at net flows as well?
We are not looking at net flows at the moment, no. We've talked about that. Honestly, VMware already has kind of Network Insight, which does net flow analysis.
Yeah, but I don't want two tools.
I understand. And so we are looking into that. We don't at the moment, though.
So you're just looking at the state of a configuration across the whole environment and putting it all together so that you can look in one spot.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we're tracking changes. So anytime a change comes, and so because of the integration into the logs, we actually show you the logs that are relevant to that object. So when somebody does a change, you can actually see what that is instead of going to your centralized logging or your provider to try to find that specific log.
So you're more about risk mitigation than event mitigation.
Yeah, we're looking at risk and giving you context. So the other thing we do is, when you have a finding, let's say, you have a policy that says EC2 should not have a public IP and be internet accessible over SSH, right? Your typical thing. We will, when that gets fired or you get that alert, it's going to show you the path of that EC2 all the way out to the internet gateway and all the objects in the way, so that you can kind of see, okay, does this make sense? Is this really a risk? Is there other things? And you can then explore, and I'll show you that in a second, where you can actually take that information, put it into the query database query tool and say, okay, what else is attached to that security group? Maybe there are other objects that I need to look at that, will give me more context as to, is this a risk that I'm worried about or not? So this is kind of the underlying database, and this is where we find most of the value from our customers are seeing is this database, right? I mean, the policies and rules we have are really just queries on top of this database, but being able to easily find things, query, keywords, IP addresses, object types, you can do any of that, and I'll show you in a second. And then we also overlay things like threat data. So we integrate with your AWS GuardDuty or Azure Security Center. So we'll say, this is misconfigured. And then we also saw, a GuardDuty event that said you got a brute force attack and you also have port 22 open, right? This might be, you might want to elevate and fix this because we have multiple risks associated with an object. And so the search capability is, again, just to speak, it's not just by account, so you can actually query across your entire portfolio. So this is really key for, let's say an analyst gets an alert and there's an IP address that is, being seen as maybe compromised. And let's be honest, in the data center, we used to have spreadsheets or something. You knew what that IP range was, or at least where it's located. In your public cloud environment, you probably have no idea. So you can literally put in that, that IP address, hit the find, bring back all that information, or find me every object that has a specific tag. I know we talk a lot about tags, but find me everything with this tag, and then I can query, search that down, or give me a Kubernetes, everything with this namespace, right? I have namespace used across multiple clusters, bring me back that information, and then maybe I'll go dig deeper if I need to get more information.
Maybe I missed it, but which clouds do you support? Which public clouds?
GCP or Google, Amazon, and Azure.
3, okay.
Yeah, the big 3. So the other thing I'm just gonna briefly go over this and I'll show this more in the demo, right? It's the operations of a tool like this, right? We find a lot of times it's great to get all this data. What do I do with it once I get it? So the first thing we've really developed is suppressions. So in this example here, I've actually created a suppression rule to say, anytime the following things occur, don't alert me. And don't alert me for a specific time. And so we're tracking this and being able to report on it. So you can still look at it in your, let's say, compliance reports if you want to, but it's not going to create an alert. It's not going to be on your dashboard. You're not going to get the noise. But we're still keeping it there because what happens is if you don't, find this and you get breached later on, you'll be like, well, why didn't we, get alerted on it? And that might be something that you did it on purpose. You can turn off rules, what we call rules, right? Policies. When you do that, we don't even look for that. So there's 2 different ways of kind of handling the information or the risk that you're interested in. The next we do is alerts. So alerts, again, we figured that with the new model that organizations are running, it's a distributed model. So having all your alerts go to your SOC or your central IT security can be slow, right? Let's be honest. We had one customer who literally would say, my SOC would get an alert 3 days later when they got to it, they would get to the developer. Well, once they figure out who did it and what the workflow was and they get to the developer, well, by that time, the developer's on his 3rd iteration of that application. And so that alert was seen as useless and they would ignore it. So we allow you to create very strategic, granular, whatever you want to call it, alerts, where you can have multiple criteria of, when to actually send an alert and to whom. So, in this example, for these rules in this location with this tag and this account, you can do multiple things, send it to the Slack channel, whatever it is. We have multiple ways of sending those alerts. But again, it's trying to get that information out so that you're not always having to be, especially being a security guy, it's not always on you to try to keep up with this. It's kind of distributed out so that everybody is responsible for security. And lastly, remediation. So the way we do remediation is a little bit unique. We have you deploy a Docker image in your environment. We do not have write permission to your accounts. You as a customer provide the permissions to the worker. We signal it. We'll say, hey, here's a job I want you to run, and then it will perform that job for us. It allows you to really control the access level. So each job type, so let's say, that SSH open port example, you would go in and run a specific job that will say, change security group rule, right? That's a job. You would provide the permission for the worker to have that ability and nothing else. We don't need admin rights. You can actually be very fine grained, and every job actually lists what rules or permissions it needs in order to function correctly. So, we have customers who, want to allow it to do lots of things. Other customers want to do very little. Let's be honest, we all want to be automated in terms of our remediations, but most of us are very hesitant to break anything. But things like S3 bucket encryption, we turn that on automatically because that's an easy one and you're not going to break anything. And that's the first one customers feel comfortable with. Yes.
I didn't understand where you deploy CloudHealth and if it controls both internal and external security. So do I have an agent or something that is into my account, all my accounts, so I can check for each single account? Or misconfiguration happens also inside the cloud, not just publicly facing services.
So this is a SaaS service, and we just need a role in your public accounts. So in your AWS, Azure, GCP, we just get a role which has read permissions to your accounts, and then we have you run. GCP, it's PubSub, SNS in AWS to send us the log files. So your CloudTrail logs or things of that nature. But there's no agent to install. The worker that we have you deployed, which does the remediation, is just a Docker image you deploy one place, and that, you know, that's so that it can be localized and controlled by you, but there's no agent installed.
Does it one of those Dockers in every cloud you're managing, or just one like in a central place? Or
so most customers will do the worker per provider. So it can, you know, one for AWS, one for Azure, one for GCP, but that one agent can run across multiple accounts as long as you allow it to assume roles, right? So it's part of that permissions that you give it.
that's a pretty highly elevated privileged.
Well, no, but I mean, you can let it assume role, but then limit what the actions it does. So you'll say, you can assume into these 4 accounts, but you can only do S3 put encrypt on S3, for example.
I guess that's a good thing, because that way I don't have to give your SaaS platform a role or any kind of administrative privilege.
Exactly.
In case you get hacked. So that
the whole point is that it's least privilege, right? We run the platform from a gathering as a read-only, and then this is all, you know, the worker remediation is all managed by the customer in terms of permissions. And so it is a least privilege. Like you can literally say for S3 bucket enable encryption, I just need this one access, this one action, which is put encryption. That's it. So you don't have to give us extra. Good.
About the licensing, how do you license so it's a SaaS subscription?
Yep.
For the number of accounts you have, for the number of clouds, for the number of.
So that's a great question. We actually do it based on your compute workload. So, you know, VM instances, databases, Kubernetes clusters. And we charge per object like that, but we do like an hourly average, a daily average, and we charge you on the monthly average. So, you know, if you burst and then you cut down again, then we're not gonna, you know, you're not gonna pay for the maximum that you had. And so it's per object.
And this is the same product of the previous presentation. So in the end, you have a single license and they get.
So there is a bundled SKU that has both of them, which is based on percent of cost. Yes, but it's two different.
Same interface, same user experience. So one is a thing, the other is another.
They are. We're under the CloudHealth umbrella, but we're 2 different products. We find that it's a different audience. So the security, the person who's in charge of security and audit and compliance is not necessarily the same person in charge of FinOps and things of that nature. And so the user, the you know, what they're looking for is different. And so there are 2 different products. So this is the Secure State product. This is just your starting dashboard. So I'm just gonna jump to a couple of different things that we kind of covered. I'm gonna go right to this Explorer tool. So this Explorer is that database that I was talking about, right? This is the way for you to be able to query anything that I have in all my accounts. And I have here, I think I have, how many accounts do I have? I have, you know, GCP, Azure, and AWS accounts attached to here. And for example, I'm gonna put PII, right? And now these are all the objects in my different environments that contained PII. I didn't put in quotes, like I could do that all, but I'm just looking for that name. And these are the objects that came back with it. Now you can see this is just a little table, but I could actually convert this to a graph. And this is this graph model that we run everything on. It's a little small, I know. Let me see if I can expand it for you. So you can see here, these are the different objects. You know, it's KMS key. I have a bucket here, some ACL, some things of that nature, right? So these are just a high level how I can do a quick query. I have some save queries, I'm gonna run real quick just to give you another example. So in this example, I'm looking for an EC2 that has a specific tag, and then that's attached to a VPC. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just do this add to graph, just to kind of show you what I mean by, you know, us understanding your environment. So you can see here, this, let's zoom in, this EC2 that I clicked on, right? These are all the object types that it can be attached to, or does have attached to it, right? It has an image, it has a security group, it has a profile, a key pair, things of that nature. And what I can do here is I can actually click on any of these and click add to graph. Let's grab this key pair here, the add to graph. Now if I pull back, it's better if I had better resolution, right? You can see now that they've kind of connected, right? Now I know all the objects that have that same key pair that they share, or things that share the same image. So again, I can do this, and this is not a security, you know, review. This is strictly a inventory visibility thing.
Dependency mapping, yeah.
So yeah, so you can do all kinds of things, you know, to look for it. You can create your own save queries. You can also write custom rules around this, your own policies, and I'll go into rules in a little bit, but this is the power of this database. And it's not just limited to, instances. For example, let's say I want to look at Kubernetes, right? So here's an interesting one, right? I have an IAM profile, which is right here at this end. And up here at the top is the query language, which we don't have really time to go into, but it's a type ahead. It's fairly self-explanatory. But here's this IAM profile right here. And you can see on the right-hand side, I actually have the configuration details. So if I scroll down here, you can see here I have action star, resource star, i.e. it's an admin, full, policy. And it's attached to, a managed policy to a role. And then this role is attached to this, cluster account. So it's not actually attached to the instance, which is typically how it's done. It's actually attached to the cluster account, which makes it problematic because if you couldn't see the Kubernetes side and the AWS side, you might not see that you've all of a sudden over permissioned this environment, right? And then I can, actually go all the way down and actually see which instance it's running on, which is right here. And again, you can see I'm pulling back all the config detail. I have some findings on this object and things of that nature. So this is just part of what we're able to do because we're able to tie both sides of the house, right? The infrastructure and the Kubernetes side as well, and then put in, things like configuration details, right? This is just the EC2 information that I just pulled, right? I clicked on the EC2. Here's the things you have. You can see we're tracking changes, the objects that are connected to it, on the first level. And you can see here, this is the config detail, and here's that activity log. So, I was saying how we grab that log data and have it sent. So that's that activity log there. So we're able to tie that directly to the object. Yes.
So question, how in band is that? I mean, obviously discovering this whole thing has got to take some resources to do it. And I presume you're showing us a wonderful use case and everything's already cached, right?
So, no, this is all live.
This is all live?
This is all live
Okay.
SaaS, yeah.
I take that back. But so it's obviously pretty quick, right?
Yes.
You're traversing the metadata,
Mhm.
figuring out what everything is connected,
Mhm.
right? So you could be doing this because suddenly, oh my gosh, our EC2 or ingress costs have shot up dramatically and we don't know why.
Yep.
Let's drive in. Okay, so that'd be a practical use case.
Yeah. We actually had a use case, somebody's using CloudHealth for costing. It's the exact same point. They saw something got popped. Their EC2 got really expensive. They're like, they were Bitcoin mining. They went to this, they went to find what else is there, what key was maybe compromised, what other objects are connected to that key, and then use that for that, yes.
So it could be a legitimate thing we need to know because we need to plan ahead, but it could also be, oh my gosh, what is going on here again? For
sure, yeah. That's a great question. Yeah, so this is all, by the way, this is all real. This is not cached. This is part of the speed of this. And this is, the power of this tool is we built it for scale first, and then we've added features, and that's part of why we're able to report this stuff so quickly. So just to give you an example, right? When you do have a finding, so a finding for us is a rule violation or a policy, you can use either word for that, right? Like what shouldn't be configured in a certain way. But when you do have something, you do your high, medium, and low, but we'll actually do some other things. So, let's say I pick on the EC2. You can see here we have risk scores. This one's got a 92, and this down here at the bottom's probably got a 79. What we're looking for when we do a risk score is how many objects are 1 hop, 2 hop, and 3 hops away from the violating or misconfigured object. Really, we're trying to figure out is the blast radius. If you had a limited time, you can only fix one of these. Which one should you fix first? And that's what that risk score is. And then what you do is, let's say here's the finding. And typically most products out there, let's be honest, this is what they give you. They kind of give you a one-line item. They kind of give you a couple things. This is the framework, right? And this is where we're a little unique, is that, every time you click on a finding, we're going to give you this graph view of it, show you what's in the, what we call the violation chain, what's part of that chain of objects that are causing this to be triggered. And then you can click on any of these objects. You can see here, I have this little icon right here. That means I have activity log. So I can click on activity log, see who did what here. I can see that let's say I click on this internet gateway. I am the one who actually did the attached internet gateway. And you can see the user is from the log file. So from a SOC or security perspective, a lot easier for you to now go back to, in this case, myself, to say, hey, why did you deploy this? You should know better, you know, like let's educate you, things of that nature. Now, you could also say, you know what, I want to suppress this. You know, this is acceptable, this is my dev environment, or I have a reason for it. You can submit a suppression request and then an admin will approve it. You can also, if you wanted to remediate, if I have a pre-configured remediation job, which I do here, I can actually click remediate and this will signal that worker that we talked about earlier, and it will run this job for me.
If you do suppressions,
Yes.
how do you go back and find out whether they should still be valid, you know, 3, 6, 9 months later? Because it's very easy just to suppress, and then find you've suppressed things that you shouldn't really have done, or you forget you've done it.
Right. Oh,
And you know, then you go back and think, oh yeah, I've left an exposure there, which I didn't really realize.
yeah. So suppressions are all. So this is a suppression management screen. So suppressions are, first of all, you set a time. I mean, you could do until I suppress, but typically most customers put in a time frame. So after that time, it goes back into the queue. And you can see here we do show you what, for example, I have actually active. This is actually on the front screen as well. So I can actually, there's a couple places you can actually see what is active and suppress. Also in the reports themselves, when you generate a report, we actually have a field to say, is this suppressed or not? So you can, again, get a weekly report run and see that it's suppressed so you don't lose track of it. So yeah, does that answer?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. The other thing though I really like is this idea where we can do the pre-configured suppression. So to your point about, you know, not letting it go too far, you can decide how long that duration should be. You can actually do it by, you see I have org and projects here. So we actually allow you to segment this data into projects. So you can say, you know, these 5 accounts belong to this line of business. They only get to access to this. Whereas an org level is your security operations. They see everything. So again, you want to enable those, you know, different lines of business to be able to, you know, have their own policies, have their own alerting. We allow you to do that in here.
Are those projects defined?
They're defined by accounts. So you say, you know, I want these 3 Amazon and these Azure accounts to be project A. You define that, and then you assign users to that, and they have different levels of access. And then just, yeah, so just to say, you know, this is, for example, I'm going to do a suppression, and you can see these are the criteria I can use to automatically suppress any new findings that come based on this. And so you can kind of do all kinds of things where you can say, you know, anything with app is equal to fit cycle, and maybe it's in my my development environment, automatically suppress it, right? All of a sudden I've reduced a ton of noise. And this is, I think, key to any tool like this, is that it's great that it finds everything, but you have to also be able to operationalize it, reduce the noise, and things of that nature.